Good evening, my name is Ryan DiGiuseppe, and tonight I'll be making my argumentative presentation about why all law enforcement officers need to have some sort of medical training as well as carry basic medical supplies with them on the job. So as I've stated in previous videos before, currently I am a law enforcement officer enlisted in the Air Force. Our career field is split up between law enforcement as well as base and asset security. My background has been primarily fire and rescue service as well as emergency medicine for the past about 13 years now. As far as training goes and certifications, I have a national registered EMT basic. I have my current CPR card, as well as military's TCCC, which is Tactical Combat Casualty Care. It is kind of the standard that most law enforcement as well as military-wise they're moving towards. So the biggest point that I would like to make about this is carry medical gear on yourself for yourself, yourself and your partner and your teammates. Because let's say if my partner goes down or if someone on my fire team goes down, once we subdue the threat, I can move over to that individual if they're not already working on themselves and grab a tourniquet or a pressure bandage from their own kit and use it on them so that I don't have to use my stuff on them. So that later on, if we're exfilling or if we get into another firefight, I go down, I can grab my tourniquet and apply it to myself, or my buddy can grab my tourniquet and my supplies and start helping myself. So first and foremost, it's for yourself as well as for your team. Second main point would be for the people that you respond to. So as well as the perpetrator, the bad guys that you respond to. So that can mean anyone from a simple verbal assault or a physical assault that we have to go hands-on to subdue the individual, up to an active shooter event. So starting with the victim of the incident. So if I respond to a single shooting, or if I respond to a domestic that was involving a deadly weapon, and I come up and the victim is bleeding or has a bunch of scratches or anything of the sort, once I secure the scene, secure the threat, I can immediately, instead of waiting for an ambulance to arrive, I can start giving basic first aid care, whether that's wrapping wounds, whether that's stopping the bleeding, anything to that extent. And then on the other spectrum, active shooter, if I'm responding, and once the threat is secure and subdued and area secure, I can start treating wounded individuals as need be. On the other side of that, not a lot of people really understand that once we take custody of the suspect, of the individual who is committing the crimes, he is now our responsibility. Whether that's going hands-on, wrestling somebody to the ground, handcuffing them, they have a bunch of cuts, scrapes, and bruises that might be bleeding on themselves or bleeding in our car or on us. We could take a pressure bandage or some gauze, wrap it up, secure it. We don't need an ambulance. We can put them in the back of our car and go to the hospital or take them back to the station. Again, on the other spectrum, if an active shooter, once we put down that active shooter threat, we secure the individual, we search them, and now they are our responsibility. That doesn't mean they're the first person we're going to treat, but that just means that they're in the rack and stack for triage, for priority. So if I go through and I list 1, 2, and 3 as or A, B, and C as my 1, 2, and 3 individuals I need to treat, he could be A, he could be C. It just depends on severity of the wounds and the injury. I would like to get into a couple of tools and basic supplies that you can carry with you. The first and most important one that I believe everybody should carry on them is the tourniquet. I keep mine in a small pouch, either affixed to my plate carrier or my belt, which right now is on the small of my back on my belt. So this tourniquet right here is called the Combat Action Tourniquet. It's extremely easy to deploy once you set it up correctly. You just pull it apart, and you're already ready to go. This will fit around my leg, this will fit around my arm. If need be, I can take it out all together and feed it through something. It's self-adhesive, so it'll Velcro to itself. Once you apply the tourniquet, you take your windlass, your device here, and you start to wind it down. Once you get to the good pressure where the bleeding stops, you always want to make sure the bleeding stops. Take your stay, wrap it around so it won't move in place. Right here is a little place that you can write the time down. It's always important to note the time, whether you write it on the tourniquet, whether you write it on the person, in a pen, whether you call dispatch and notify them. As a last case scenario, you can write it in blood on the individual, but you always want to note that time. A couple other supplies that are good to carry, at least in a go bag or a medical bag in your car or patrol car, is a pressure bandage and gauze, compression gauze. The compression gauze will actually be used to stuff into the bullet wound. So if there's a bullet hole in my arm, you take that gauze and you just start pressing, and you fill up that cavity that the bullet made. If there's any extra, you just push it on there. The pressure dressing is a pad. Put the pad on there, and you take your working end, wrap it around once, feed it through a little mechanism, and then you just wrap. And it creates pressure, stops the bleeding, and it works wonders, to be honest. Those are just some basic tools that I like to keep with me that I think everybody should have with them, but at the very, very basic, it needs to be a tourniquet. Along back to the training is we should always be training with local law enforcement as well as local fire and EMS so that you guys are on the same page. With us, we like to train with the fire department on post and get into that relationship, that professional relationship, that we both know how we're going to act, what we're going to do on a major scene before we even get there. So if I have that FaceTime and I understand that I know that guy or he knows me, and we roll up to a scene together, I'm coming in my patrol car, he's coming in an ambulance, he knows my level of care, or provider level, and he knows what I'm capable of and what kind of gear I have, so he knows, okay, go take care of him, and her. Okay, roger that. And then he's going to go work on someone who needs some care at a paramedic level. So you just build that rapport and build that FaceTime with those guys. And also something that's kind of in the works, still kind of new, but it's being used. It's called the Rescue Task Force, which is mostly for active killing or active shooter events, where the EMTs will link up and create a fire team with law enforcement officers and move into the building as soon as they can to start providing care and start exfilling people out of the building. Generally, this is done after the threat is secured, but the building is still a hot zone. It hasn't been completely cleared out. Other great training aids that I use for my guys, there's a couple videos on YouTube. There's one of Las Vegas Police Department. They are forced to subdue an individual using deadly force. Once they shoot the guy, they have hit him once in the leg, and it's very, very obvious arterial bleed. It's pumping out. So after they secure the scene, secure the individual, search the individual, they go right into that mode where the officer has a tourniquet on his ankle, pulls the tourniquet up, holsters his weapon, goes to work, and ultimately ends up saving the guy's life. Quick thinking, the tourniquet was on him. He didn't have to go back to the car. It's a perfect example, and I use it training all the time. Like I said, especially for my guys. There's another video of two officers. One gets shot in the leg. It's nothing arterial, but he's still bleeding enough to start running down his leg. So as that officer who shot holds security down the street onto the perp who's shooting at them, his partner doubles back around, grabs his own tourniquet, throws it on the guy who was shot, winds it down, radios dispatch, notifies them of tourniquet application, as well as to note the time for application of the tourniquet. So, in closing, with all this, you don't need to be a surgeon, you don't need to be a paramedic, you don't need to be a doctor to know basic life-saving skills. It's extremely important, and just those three supplies that I showed you right there are enough to save somebody's life someday. So I believe that honestly, I believe that everybody should have some sort of medical training and carry at least a tourniquet in their vehicle with them, or in their backpack, or in their laptop case. But that's kind of a lot to ask for, so I'll settle with all law enforcement and military to carry some sort of life-saving equipment. So, thank you for listening, and have a good night.